My name's Randy. I'm one of the owners of the hotel.
Hello.
Along with my dad, Dale, my brother, Steve, and my dad's wife, Betty.
Hey.
Thanks for staying with us. Where's everybody from? Farmington, Minnesota, right?
Yes.
Right?
Madison,
I'm really ignorant on
Wisconsin.
Minnesota geography.
Madison, Wisconsin.
Madison, Wisconsin. Okay. Very cool. You've been to Duluth before?
Oh, yeah.
Lots of times?
Our first
Been
time.
here before?
Yep.
Wonderful. Thanks for coming back.
Yep.
And you guys' first stop here? Okay.
Yeah.
We spend about a little better than an hour. Is anybody checking out today by chance?
No.
Okay. I always make sure you get late checkouts if you are, just in case you run long. An hour and 15 seems to go a little longer than that.
No, I'm in no rush.
Good, good. If you do have to leave, just say adios and away you go. I kind of stop before that. We get to start at the beginning of the pier and make our way out to the end. And that's kind of when I'm done talking, and then I just walk back and
All right.
questions and ask. And I talk a lot, so just interject if you have some questions along the way. It's kind of foggy. We can't see. Usually people say, "What's that? What's that? What's that?" What would be there? What would be there? So I might have to do a little bit of that. That if you could see it, it would be.
I was out at 2:30 this morning getting the Masabi Miner coming in. I got
okay.
video of it. It
Nice,
was
nice.
great.
Yep.
And I got that ship from Amsterdam. I took a night picture of it too when it was still out there. It wasn't foggy at that
Okay,
time
cool.
of morning.
Yeah, you get those different times a day.
We were on our star tour yesterday, so we saw all the sites yesterday.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll compare
A lot
notes
of
if I
of them.
if I come up with different explanations than they do. It's always interesting.
It was fun.
The Masabi Miner, just in the lobby, right to the left of the fireplace, there's a little brochure on when the Masabi Miner was first the ribbon cutting or whatever you call the introduction.
Yeah.
There's a word. Introduction to the ship. They put a pamphlet together, and it's kind of fun if you saw the boat to kind of see.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Early
Yeah.
70s brochure on what it was, why it's named that, and what it does, and how big it is, and all that business.
That was really thrilling. I got video of it coming through.
The best show in town. It's why we're here.
Yeah.
Let's make our way to the
Location.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Are you from Duluth?
I am from Duluth. I'm from about a mile and a half down there. Previously, about a mile down there. Previous to that, about 3 miles down there. That's 7 addresses.
So you moved along the island, or what do they call this?
It's Park Point.
Park Point.
Geographically, it's Minnesota Point. Park Point is the name of the neighborhood that sits on it. Pretty synonymous. But there's that neighborhood. Park Point only goes so far, and then Minnesota Point keeps going. The end of Park Point. Old Park Pointers never die. We just drive to the end and then walk the rest of the way. Yeah, so from a satellite view, especially when you're not really from here, from a satellite view, Duluth and Superior, we make up the twin port. We're standing on Minnesota Point, which is basically the longest freshwater sandbar in the world. When combined with Wisconsin Point, which is about 3 miles long, you got a 10-mile strip of sand, or nothing but a sandbar. It's about 3,000 years old. The hill is 1 billion years old. Park Point's 3,000 years old. So what Park Point does, or Minnesota Point and Wisconsin Point does, it protects this inner harbor. That's Duluth's magic sauce, is that we've got 49 miles of developable shoreline where you can load boats in calm weather out of Lake Superior's raft. That's not where it started. It started out on the outside of Park Point. That's going to give you that. But back up to the satellite, we're in the center of the North American continent. We're 2,300 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, something similar to the Pacific Ocean. Back in the day, it was 8 weeks by canoe in either direction to get to an ocean. But that, again, is Duluth. The big things that make Duluth and Superior significant is that we're at the end of the Great Lakes Seaway, or the St. Lawrence Seaway system, whichever you want to call it. 2,300 miles. You can float anything from the center of the continent out to the rest of the world, or vice versa. Like you saw, that Norwegian ship, I think, was hauling wind turbine parts.
Sure.
I think.
I've seen that before.
That comes in, and that's, so it goes both ways.
I saw her come in this morning. You can't see it real good, but right over there she's docked.
Yep, you're exactly right. That's our. This is different. I've never given a tour in the fog. I got to point to things that aren't there. Everything that would be in front of us here are mostly all grain docks. We call that elevator row. There's 4 of them left. There was at one time 11. The oldest one is straight across from us. If you're ever back here, the one on the right-hand side, it's the dark-colored one. 1909, so it's 112 years old.
Given that grain is so important to this port,
Yep.
where is it coming from?
It
Obviously, the farms are located, throughout the Midwest, all the way down to Texas, probably?
no, more west than that. Originally when Duluth is first, I like to say the foundation of Duluth is grain. Iron ore is going to be bigger, but later. Grain carries the day for about 15 years before iron ore is carried. So if you go back in time to when it's for 1870, all of it's coming from southern Minnesota. In the St. Paul, Minneapolis region, it's all being harvested down there. There aren't any trains heading west at that time in the northern part of the country, so there may be grain out there, there's a potential for grain out there, but it's not coming here yet. That's going to happen in the second step, and that's really why Duluth is the thing, is when the trains start going west.
The wooden schooners that were ferrying everything throughout the continent.
Yep.
I'm assuming back then they were sailing up the Mississippi. Do we have ships that are still, like maybe coming from here and going over to Portland, Oregon?
No, the water highway pretty much stops here.
No, I mean if they...
went around?
Do they ever transit and go over to the... I mean, sure, they can go out the Seaway and hit points on the east, but do they ever go to the west?
It depends on the boat. We get some grain boats. It's rare that a grain boat will leave Duluth, go to the Atlantic Ocean, go down and go through the Panama Canal and head west, over to the Asian countries. That's rare. Most of our shipments go either to South America, not so much Africa anymore, but some European ports and some other deals there. Not a lot goes that whole round route. But what Duluth brought to the table way back when was a shortcut. You could put something on a boat in New York or from Europe, bring it to New York. You had to put it on a little train to get around Niagara Falls back then. But as soon as you got around Niagara Falls, you could bring that shipment all the way to Duluth, then put it on a train and bring it to Portland. So you had... Duluth is in the center of that system. A water highway halfway, and then a train highway the rest of the way. And that way you're actually connecting the entire, both oceans, and there was the theory that you could now ship things from Europe to Japan through Duluth, in a sort of way. And that was the vision when Duluth was found by a guy named J. Cook. He saw that as what Duluth can be. And he's really the father of Duluth. It should be Cooksville or J-Town.
State park coming into
We got
town,
a state park.
He's got...
Real briefly, that was some land that he owned. He was a visionary. He was a very rich person, late 1800s. He had made his money in the Civil War. As the broker of the Civil War, he financed the North's fight during the Civil War. Without Jay Cook and his company that sold the bonds over in Europe and all that, questionable how the war might have turned out. You got to have money, and he had the Midas touch for raising money. Civil War is over. Now what am I going to do? I've got all this talent, all this money. Railroads. As soon as the Civil War is over, railroads become the thing. Everything's going west. The Civil War was out east for the most part, and now that that's all over, we're done with that miserable business. Let's start settling this continent. And so the trains are starting to go west. The Transcontinental Railroad is the first one across the middle of the continent. Jay Cook says we need one across the top. And he gets involved in the Northern Pacific Railroad that is looking for investors, looking for somebody to carry the ball, and he's the guy because he had the great touch in the Civil War. Railroads are not cheap. You need to be able to raise money to get from here to there on a big railroad.
Not that I'm looking forward to this, but what about possible shipping, God forbid, the Arctic Passage that a lot of people have suggested may happen if global warming continues?
Yeah, that's I've never really thought about that's impact on Duluth. I got to think about that a little bit. Other than most of our cargo comes from either regionally or west of here. So it wouldn't make sense to bring it further up north to put it on a boat. But if you were going from Europe to Japan, you might take a new route up north instead of come through here.
Through
and then now that I think of it,
that goes just outside of Canada.
Right, and that might affect like the Panama Canal. Might be highly affected by that.
Would, because then
you can't take a boat across the country. You got to
go
go around one way or the other.
A lot closer than going down to Panama.
And that's, you know, and that just made me think of something I often forget, is if you back up to our satellite view and you're looking down at Duluth over here and Chicago down here, you assume Chicago is much closer to the east, but it's really not if you're on a boat. You got to go all the way up to the top of Lake Michigan and across, or across Lake Superior from Duluth, so they're a little bit closer, but on the whole, we're about the same distance to the east. Again, part of Jay Cook's vision was that we can be the next Chicago. We can be the Chicago to the rest of the country west of here, and that's why he thought the Northern Pacific Railroad was going to be a big deal, and it was. It's going to go broke, and it's going to have all sorts of problems. There's going to be some skirmishes in the Yellowstone areas. They're trying to build that railroad, and Jay Cook's going to go broke, going from one of the richest guys in the country to absolutely broke. The entire country is going to follow him in 1873, but I'm kind of getting off track a little bit.
Well,
start getting in the weeds.
it begs the question, now mind you, we're talking hundreds of years. Do we know if Jay Cook is possibly a descendant of the Cook, the captain?
Captain Cook?
Do we know if there's an indirect relationship there?
Might be a connection. They added an E somewhere along the way.
Yeah, that's true.
The captain had just C-O-O-K, and Cook had an E at the end of the name. But maybe that was his way to differentiate himself from maybe a bad reputation somebody else had, his forefather. But so let's go back to.
I don't think he's going to tell us. If he had genealogy done, he probably wouldn't tell us.
He was only in Duluth 4 times. 2 before he went broke and 2 after he went broke. The story of Duluth is interlocked with the story of Superior. Duluth is going to start as nothing but a stump-infested rock hill. Plant a potato, it's going to roll into the lake before you can dig it up. This is nothing but a swamp and a bog in front of us. That you could see, this is all swamp and bog. This was a platted area called Fremont. There were islands scattered throughout here. One of them was 1,000 feet long by 400 feet wide. That was actually platted as well. This canal is not natural. This is going to be hand dug by women and children, if you believe me. When the canal is later dug, the town of Fremont and all these islands are going to be sucked out into Lake Superior, and anybody that held title to those lots that had been platted there now own elusive grits of sand out in the lake someplace. But those islands just got sucked up. That biggest one was famously went out, somebody put a flag on it as it went by, and it just went out into the lake and dissipated. As well as a good chunk of Fremont. What's left of it is our entertainment area there. Later, once this canal is here, this area is going to later become all package freight, all small stuff that we don't get anymore. Washing machines, groceries, anything that arrives on a truck now used to arrive by a boat, would be unloaded over in this area. They're all buildings that look like this. There were 4, 6, 8-story buildings that line this entire area. There were 11 slips. I think we're down to 3 now. They all followed the same pattern: a slip on one side, a warehouse in the middle, and a train track on the other, over and over and over again, where it would arrive, get warehoused, and then dissipated up into the Iron Range north of here, or wherever else it had to go. So that all changed when highways come along and the industry slowly goes away. There's fishing piers. Fishing industry used to be big, but that was decimated. And we even had a lot of passenger traffic. Even cruises in the 1930s and 40s had a passenger terminal over there. And I can't really call it immigration, but movement of people from east to west often came through Duluth, arrived on a boat, got on a train, and headed west to settle or to mine or do whatever. So Duluth played a little part in that. It wasn't a port of entry really of any sort, but it did manage people along the way. So it kind of has a history there.
Given that Duluth and Minnesota have a Norwegian connection, a lot of Norway people, and famously miners that resettled down into Wisconsin, I'm assuming they came through here first, or maybe most of them came through here?
Norway's a big part of our history. Some people refer to the North Shore as the Norwegian Riviera. It's just so rooted in Norwegian settlement. The fishermen, especially the Norwegian fishermen, this is very much like Norway. A lot of the same conditions, so they were comfortable fishing here. There's a tower on the top called Enger Tower. Up in the fog there, Enger was a local Norwegian.
We were there.
A successful furniture maker, or furniture builder, or seller, or something like that. And he bequeathed that land that the tower is on, and then there's some connection to him in the tower. And the Prince of Norway or the King of Norway came when we christened that.
Both of them did. They
Both
were
of them did?
like 50 years apart.
Apart? Okay, wonderful. Yeah. And all kind of, because we have this Norwegian, it was worthwhile for the King and the Prince to come here because of the Norwegian ties here were so strong. And it still lasts, we still have that sort of culture, that sort of heritage, if you want to call it. The Swedes and the Finns, come in there too, a lot of Slovaks, and really Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, Western Europe, and the Scandinavian countries really are what builds Duluth up to, close to 100 or over 100,000 people at some point. That's the lion's share of the lineage, if you want to call that. The very early ones came from the eastern United States and Canada. They'd come from someplace else previously, and they were like the pioneers or the explorers of sorts that came here before immigrants. Immigrants kind of need something to land on, some previous family or some industry that they're going to have success on. It was the Eastern, mostly Germans, that first came to make something of it, to make something of this westward expansion. The railroads are heading this way. Jay Cook's getting involved. So Minnesota has this the farming down in the southern part of the state, as I mentioned. They see a better idea than going all the way to Chicago by rail. They just have to get it up to Duluth, and then they can send it by boat. The sooner you can get to water, the better, then and now. 11 times more efficient than a truck, 3-4 times more efficient than a train. Find the water as quickly as you can. Even a longer water route is probably going to be better than a shorter train route on some. Do the math, I guess. So Minnesota says, okay, we want to connect our grain area, the Mississippi River, to Lake Superior. If you're Minnesota, Duluth is your only option. You're not going to go around Duluth to connect to Lake Superior. This is the first stop, easiest stop. Don't build the railroad any further than you have to. So Minnesota starts building this railroad to connect the Mississippi and Lake Superior. Once the other end of Lake Superior is opened up by locks in the 1850s, Minnesota says we need to connect the two. Basically, it's called a portage railroad, just connecting those two bodies of water to move stuff between and get that grain to Lake Superior and out east as efficiently as possible. Superior gets the head start. They're the early bird. As I said, we're on Minnesota Point, or Park Point. It's 7 miles long, or now it's 6 miles long. It used to be 7 miles long before this pesky ditch was dug. You could, traverse this without any hesitation at all. There was no water here. The natural entry to this protected harbor is 7 miles down, or 6 miles down from where we're standing, right on the doorstep of Superior. You come in that natural entry, there's Superior, Wisconsin. 19 guys from out east, called the 19 proprietors, saw that, established Superior, platted it, got a couple thousand people to come and settle over there, well ahead of Duluth that has 14 families, and they've got 2,000 people. The scale's tilted this way. Duluth is going to quickly do this because of Jay Cook and a couple other things, and grow to be 112,000 at our peak, and they're never going to top 34,000. So it's and we've always been about 3 or 4 times bigger ever since that shift in the teeter-totter happens because of this ditch that opens up this harbor. That until then, so Superior's on the doorstep of the natural harbor. There's 2 rivers that go out that other end, and they naturally dredge the area to 8-10 feet at the time, which was a lot of water for boats of the 1870s to navigate. This, on the other hand, is swamp and bog, islands. Fremont that comes out into here. It's unnavigatable. It's a long way from navigatable water. It's too formidable to develop as a harbor. So Minnesota's building its railroad to Duluth. It can't have a railroad to nowhere. They build an outer harbor. And if I remember when we're out there, I wish we could run out there for a second and then run right back. I pointed out and show you how it laid out, but that's where they were going to end where they did end their railroad. Built a grain elevator out there, 1,000-foot pier that jutted out into Lake Superior. Still there, you just can't see it, it's underwater. But there's a buoy that marks it, so I'll try to point that out if we can see it. But that was the end of the railroad. And Jay Cook, as he's getting involved in the Northern Pacific, he sees Duluth as a way to get money going, get the cash register dinging early on. He says that's not good enough. We need this inner harbor here. If we dig a ditch through here, if we dig it, they will come. And we will have a world-class harbor. He saw this, he spoke about this. That little harbor out there, Mother Nature is going to wreak havoc with that. That was fairly obvious. It only lasted about 2.5 years, and it's completely destroyed. It lingers for a little while, but it's just not it's not a significant harbor for a transcontinental railroad. This is the eastern terminus for the Northern Pacific Railroad, technically 20 miles south, but really Duluth is the end of the road. So he proposes and throws his money. At first he helps build that outer harbor so that there's something for the railroad to come to. Then he says we got to develop this. So he gets his money involved in digging this ditch and developing the harbor. And this doesn't sit well with Superior. Superior's been here for 15 years. They've started their city in the 1850s. They were hit with a financial panic in the late 50s. That wipes their efforts out. Then the Civil War comes along. That puts everything to a halt. Now the Civil War is over. They're ready to go. They didn't have Jay Cook. And Jay Cook was interested in a sure thing, so he gets the city of Duluth and his own money to start digging this canal. Superior says, we've been around for 15 years, we've got a lot of money invested in this, we're 19 guys from Philadelphia, not so fast. You can't be digging a ditch there because our business, oh, did I say our business is going to be ruined? No, our harbor is going to be ruined. You know, you can't really argue in the courts that your business is going to be affected, but you can argue that your port is going to be filled in and become the swampy, boggy end of the bay. That Duluth now is, you dig this ditch, these two rivers are going to reroute and come out this way. And that's what Superior argues in the courts and gets the judge to agree with them. He says, Duluth, you can't dig this ditch. So he writes up an injunction stopping Duluth must stop digging. The digging of this ditch, this is down in Kansas City. And Superior has pushed this in the courts, arguing that one state's actions cannot harm another state. It's true then, it's true today, so that was their argument that the judge bought into. The judge writes up the injunction. Duluth's a brand new city in 1870. We're talking 1871 when this injunction is written. Our good mayor at the time, Mayor Culver, gets a telegraph that says, you know, an injunction's on the way to stop the digging of your canal. Mayor Culver is the responsible person of a brand new city. He needs to address this situation, so he comes down to talk to the contractor who's got a dredge, namely Ishpeming, that's digging the canal. And he explains that there's an injunction that's been written up to stop the digging of the canal. And the contractor says, all right, you want us to stop then, don't you? And he says, I didn't say that. He said, the injunction's on its way, dig faster. And at this point, city legend, Duluth's biggest founding legends, you got to have one that says you roll up your sleeves and you've got fortitude. The mayor calls out for every able-bodied man, woman, and child with a spade, a pickaxe, a bucket, or a shovel to come down and hand dig this canal ahead of this injunction, which they do to some extent. History doesn't point to a lot of kids with pickaxes or dynamite, but it was hand dug when they came across some ice. But that dredge, the Ishpeming, worked morning, noon, and night to beat the injunction that arrives on a Monday morning. And when it does, the little tug called the Pharaoh is going in and out of the ditch, and you can't stop what's already been done.
How big was this ditch that you're calling it?
It depends. You know, the first time it was the width of the dredge's shovel, and then Mother Nature started. You know, the currents. These islands are going to get sucked out naturally. The canal's never dredged to this day. It always
No, I
naturally
mean,
keeps
how
itself
much
clear.
did, in terms of, no, it may not have been very wide.
Right. Yeah.
But how long was it?
Oh, how long was it? That's a good question. You know, Park Point, you know, it's from these rocks to the beach, and we'll walk past the beach. So it was, this area has a really rich history that, you know,
Not
gets
even a mile then.
Yeah, no, not even a mile. We're talking 300 feet, something like that. You know,
And
they
with everybody coming down here that's in the area, it wouldn't take them very long to dig a mile.
Right, yeah, and then they had this dredge. It was a steam dredge, you know, so they weren't using the pickaxes like the legend says so much as a big dredge that knew what it was doing and had the power of pistons operating for it. So they were digging. It started in the fall. They had to quit for the winter, then they started up in the spring, and that's why they ran into some ice. They were working in April, and as you dig into the ground, sometimes you find some ice. And that's where the legend, there's always truth in some legends, they had to hand pick at that and use dynamite and pick at that ice because the dredge was just scraping on it and couldn't get through. So there's that little bit of truth that hangs out in there. But you hit on a good point. We're about we're one of the narrowest parts of Park Point right here, and that was you know, one of their ideas was you got to do the most efficient. You don't want to make more work for yourself anyhow. They take this spot, which is historically significant because you go back hundreds of years, and this is where the Native Americans had their little portage. when they take their canoes down the North Shore, they also, where's the shortest way to carry our canoes across? And it was right here. They had a name for it. It was called Onigamisig, means the little portage or the little carrying place. And that was their name for Duluth. If you had to pick an earlier name for Duluth, it's long. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but it's something along the lines of Onigamisig, carrying place.
Which Indian tribe was here?
Originally the Dakota, and then the Chippewa, or the Ojibwe, or the Anishinaabe. They have three different names. I think they prefer Ojibwe or Anishinaabe. They kind of pushed the Dakotas out. They had come from the east. They had this migration, and it had 7 points along the way. They were told you're going to have 7 stopping points. And Fond du Lac is the last one, which is about 18 miles up the river. And they crossed the top of the North America.
You're talking, I'm sorry, but there's another Fond du Lac in Wisconsin, so you're talking Minnesota.
The Minnesota Fond du Lac, yep. That was where their first villages were. They're going to have settlements out here on Park Point well after the treaties. Park Point's a very poor part of town, it's scraggly, nothing but shanties and all that, so the lingering Indians that hadn't gone to the reservations by that time, it didn't matter. It wasn't like they were being forced anywhere because it was Park Point and nobody cared. It wasn't until the mid-1970s that anybody cared about Park Point. Because previous to that, banks wouldn't even give loans down here. It was a poor part of town in my lifetime. They would redline Park Point. Okay, we don't borrow money down there. It's nothing but a bunch of old converted cottages on sand foundations and that.
It's a sandbar and that's
Yeah. Then in 1970s come around, everybody says, oh, pretty good view down here.
Yeah.
There's a beach to walk up and down, and now we're the most expensive real estate. So we dig the canal ahead of the injunction, gives us a good story for our founding fortitude. It's going to bounce around in the court for 10 years. It bounces around in the courts for 10 years, and it's not a sure thing. Duluth is going to come out on top. You can see that we did come out on top because it's still here. Because the Superior was still pushing that, let's fill it in then. So they're starting to force it to be filled in. At one point, the city of Duluth builds a dike across the entire bay out of worry that they're going to lose this court process. And by putting a dike across the middle of it, it was a mile long, stretched across that bay we were just looking up, kept the rivers on the other side of the dike. They said, are you happy now? The rivers can't come out this way. They have to go out your way. It was never about the rivers. It was always about the commerce. And it's going to take Superior 15 years to get a railroad, and in that time Duluth is able to, if you dig it, they will come, and over those 15 years they did through this canal in huge amounts as the farming went west and the iron mines start to form up north of here. Duluth becomes a huge deal, and Superior has that lack of a railroad for 15 years. Without a railroad, you're not really good for much but local lumbering and local fish trade and all that. So we really tipped the scale at that point. But the courts eventually rule in Duluth's favor, and as part of that decision, the Corps of Engineers is set up as the manager of both ports. So now it's one port as far as the federal government's concerned. All the buoys, all the channels, all the piers, everything is managed at a higher level that doesn't play favorites between Minnesota and Wisconsin. Money comes, it's one appropriation. The Corps spends it where it's most needed. They dredge where they need to. They fix piers where they have to. And that satisfied everybody as a way to, and it was good for Superior. They now had the federal government working for their causes down there. The silting never happens. We actually have better circulation of all the water. And this canal produced all those docks and the grain elevators and whatnot.
So we're talking the Corps of Engineers actually, beyond what they did here. Do we know when that government agency started?
It started, I think George Washington started it. I think that he was during the Revolutionary War. They needed some engineers to either build bridges or blow things up or something like that. So he started the
Corps of Engineers.
Yeah. So it goes as far back as you can go.
Army.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, that's why,
The first branch of service developed.
First branch of service that developed. I get your
They're
point.
the ones who developed the dikes around New Orleans and
There you go. Yep.
all that kind of stuff. That's all.
And the key word is not so much Army as engineers. Engineers is really the key word in there because that's what they are. They build stuff like this. They're the branch of the government that knows how to do this sort of thing. To dig it so that we can develop this inner harbor, everybody will be better off. Just work with us here. We'll get a bridge later, but let's get the canal first. We can't get bogged down in those details.
So the next question, obviously there's international shipments here.
Yep.
But did the commerce side of Superior grow as a result of the Corps of Engineers?
It did. They're
Dramatically or enough to keep them happy?
Enough to keep them happy dramatically, but not relative to Duluth. They go from 2,000 people at their founding to they top off at about 35,000. That's not bad. That's pretty good for a port. They've got their own grain elevators. They've got their own docks.
That's why it's a county seat.
Yep. And it was
probably wouldn't have been
sure.
there if that wouldn't have happened.
Yep, for sure. Because their canal, the natural canal, would move around. If you're ever real ambitious and want to hike down to an old lighthouse that's down at the end of there, you'll say, why did they put a lighthouse in the middle of the sand here a long way from the canal? It's because the canal moved all the time. The lighthouse used to be right almost like this, and now it's 6 blocks from the canal, just because the sand, this 3,000-year sandbar is actually moving this way all the time, and these openings fill and change around with the will of the winds and the currents and whatnot. So it moves a lot, and the Army Corps of Engineers secured that up, and it's a double canal sort of, or 2 sets of piers. There's a set of piers inside that are smaller than this but similar, and then there's these massive 2,000-foot piers that come in at angles that sort of double protect the harbor, and that's all Corps of Engineers doing. And right inside of that were at one time 5 iron ore docks. More iron ore was shipped out of there for a long period of time than Duluth. Duluth was more diversified. We had a lot more things going, but for a while they had more iron ore out of there because they had those 5 docks.
Does that mean they're still shipping iron ore out of Superior?
Yep. Only 1 dock left though. There's only 1 dock, and Duluth only has really 1 dock. There's 2 docks left over there, but they really only use 1 of them.
We were up at Anger Tower late yesterday afternoon, and way off in the distance I saw a freighter that had just left Superior.
Sure,
and
from up there you can see it.
Yeah,
Not today, but yesterday.
You could see pretty far.
Yeah, and there was a time, like in the 60s and that, they did more iron ore shipments out of there. All those docks were running. It was kind of fun at night. Childhood memories of this whole thing lit up like a Christmas tree, and all these ore boats filling, and the hum of the trains and the conveyor belts and the chutes shooting iron ore down in these pellets that make a particular noise. So they actually had a pretty good deal there.
Ammo.
Perfect caliber. I got a bucket of my.
I had it growing up on the east side of St. Paul. We had the ore trains that would come down, and the stuff would spill off, and we'd be filling our bags, our wrist rockets, and our slingshots.
Hardly ever a wrong size. They got loaded small, but almost all of them were perfect. Just as a little piece of history, the Edmund Fitzgerald left out of the Superior entry out of one of those ore docks, Burlington Northern number 1. So it has that history down there.
So that was the Edmund Fitzgerald hauling iron ore?
Yep, he was hauling iron ore, taconite pellets specifically, but the iron ore is what they're after.
We've been to the Shipwreck Museum in the UP.
Oh,
that
I
was really
haven't been there yet.
That was really fascinating.
Yeah, it's obviously our most famous shipwreck. I'm going to talk about a couple other more local ones, but the Edmund Fitzgerald is the most famous one, mostly the song. But
Gordon, thank you.
Yeah, that carried on, and it's a real accurate song, a relatively accurate song, and it's haunting, and it just lingers in your mind, and it kind of brings you there.
Well, just a couple more questions. Given that my wife and I at one point were active scuba divers, we know the history of how dangerous not only Superior but all of the Great Lakes can be. Right, Michigan is only second to Superior for number of shipwrecks.
Right, yeah.
So, needless to say, there was a lot of commerce that was still coming out of Lake Michigan back in the day.
Oh yeah, yep. And Lake Erie has its shipwrecks. It's a real shallow lake that storms can come up real fast. Lake Superior is so big, it takes a little while for those storms to go, but Lake Erie can change on a dime.
That is what scares me living up here in Superior, because I know the weather that comes through here can be brutal. And hurricane force winds, and everything across all of the Great Lakes is stopped because of a storm coming through Superior.
Exactly, yep. And I'm going to talk about our worst storm here in a minute, the 1905 storm, which was the worst, took the most ships down, most people on Lake Superior. But weather's nothing to trifle with, and that's why there's no outer harbor here anymore.
No.
It didn't last long. It is historically at high levels right now. This year's it's pretty low. It's still higher than its historical average, but it goes up and down. And the lake level, it's a complicated equation. There's a lot of evaporation. There's a lot of source water. What goes out the other end. It's a real complicated. Global warming could cause Lake Superior to go down, actually, or it could cause it to go up, given the other parts of the equation. So it's really complicated. But the Army Corps of Engineers just last year rebuilt our beach here because of the high waters that have been destroying some of the backyards. You can't quite see it here, but they've renourished 6 blocks of beach by taking the dredge spoil, the big pipe that ran right across the yard. They fire goes the slurry onto the beach to rebuild the beach because Park Point's moving this way. Mother Nature wants it in there someplace, and the Army Corps of Engineers is fighting. That's where the Army part comes in. They're fighting Mother Nature to keep it at bay.
They may be fighting a losing battle unless we do something about all of the carbon we're putting into the air.
That's for sure. And any struggle with nature is an unfair fight. Let me tell a story about this exact spot right here. One of our characters of the canal I like to call Canal Rascal Bill. If I can set the stage, it's 1889, so we're going way back. There's no bridge yet. That's not built till 1905, but the canal's been here for 17 years. And my point being, it's a very busy canal ever since that little tug, the Pharaoh, went through. Ships have been using it freely ever since. The Corps of Engineers is widening it, making it better. Inner Harbor is really highly developed by this time. Package freight, lumber, iron ore is even getting started, the grains and all that. Very busy canal until one guy says, game's over, it's my canal. All 1,600 ships that are coming and going every year, twice what's coming and going now, is going to cease. Well, let's look at Canal Rascal Bill for a second. He's a guy from Detroit. He is very wealthy. He's a lumberman. He's cut down trees in northern Michigan, then he went to northern Wisconsin. What comes next is northern Minnesota. Back during that 1873 downturn that wipes out Jay Cook, wipes out the city of Duluth, Canal Rascal Bill comes to town and buys up thousands of acres north of here for the lumber industry. As is a very common story in Duluth, he bought the trees and then later discovered the iron ore underneath them and had a heck of a boom from that discovery. Canal Rascal Bill falls into that category, as well as numerous other millionaires from Duluth. Duluth had the most millionaires per capita anywhere in the country back during its heyday of all this iron ore discovery and all the accoutrements that needed to be provided for that. But before that, Bill buys up his lumber, 8,500 acres up by Hibbing. And in that acquisition back then, he bought up everybody's stuff all over the place, and in those purchases happened to acquire 14 lots in an old plat that our hotel still sits on that are now underneath the canal. And Bill, being a business person, looks at his 14 lots down at the bottom of the canal and says, somebody owes me something. I can't do anything with these lots. I have clear title to them. The city of Duluth and Jay Cook weren't careful to dot all their I's and cross their T's and clear title. So Duluth, tell you what, we've got a problem here. And Duluth agreed, we do have a problem here. These are Bill's lots. But Bill says, I'm a reasonable man. I'm here to work with you. I don't want to be a thorn in everybody's side. Just make the check out to Bill and fill it out for $100,000 and I'll be on my way. Thank you very much. Duluth's attention was lost quickly at the $100,000 number. They were happy to look at the situation, but not at all interested in $100,000 in 1889. Too much money. Bill says, well, that's going to be a problem because we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way. Duluth says, well, you're not getting the $100,000. So Bill says, all right, I got to go back to Detroit, but before I do, I'm going to post the following notice for everybody to be aware of. And it reads, to all boat and vessel owners, you are hereby notified that on and after the 15th day of October, 1889, the right of passing through the canal connecting the waters of Lake Superior and the Bay of Duluth will be denied by me to all boat and vessels. A rope will be stretched across said canal upon my property, which lies in and upon either side of said canal, and the owner or master of any boat breaking the same will be promptly proceeded against in the courts. September 27th, 1889, Wilhelm B. So, Wilhelm posts this notice. His job is to make sure everybody sees this notice. He posted at Sault Ste. Marie down at the other end of the lake. All the shipping agents in town. It's published in the papers. He makes sure everybody knows this is going on. He has to go back to Detroit. He's got a colleague in town named Marshall Allworth. I would have pointed out his building, but you can't see it. But Marshall Allworth built the tallest building at the time in Minnesota in 1910. He's going to build the tallest building in Minnesota. Very telling of Duluth. It's still Duluth's tallest building 110 years later. And its road to Chicago stops at the top of the Allworth building, 16 stories. But anyway, Marshall Allworth is his friend. Bill goes back to Detroit, says, Marshall, manage things while I'm gone. I'll be in touch. He posts this notice in September. He's not able to get anywhere with the city over the next couple of weeks, so Allworth gets another telegraph comes in, string the rope. So on the 14th of October, Allworth is instructed to string a rope. He comes down, hires 3 guys to rope off the canal, close it for business from here on. One of them is a ferry operator that gets park pointers back and forth. There's no bridge, so the ferry operator is engaged along with 2 other guys to stretch a rope. They spike it to the North Pier, bring it across, lash it right here. History is kind enough to tell us exactly where it happened, 118 feet from the center of Lake Avenue. Lashes it off, says there we go, canal's closed, job done. Well, the mayor knew this was coming. He wasn't going to have any of it. This is a very important aspect to Duluth to be able to get into our harbor. Nobody's going to rope off our canal, he decides, so he sends the police down to be on the scene. 12:15 in the morning when they first tie the rope, the police are here to simply cut it. Other people had shown up. Everybody knew it was going to happen. The police say, you're not roping off the canal. People, there's nothing more to see here. Everybody can go home. Well, everybody did go home, including the police. So the guys stringing the rope another time. They're paid to close the canal, so they tie it a second time. First boat to encounter it's called the Winslow. It's a big package freighter, almost 200 feet long. It's steaming up the lake, very powerful boat. The guys string the rope and head out to the end of the pier to let boats know it's closed. The canal's closed. Here comes the Winslow. Clears the 2 pier heads. The guys yell, "You're gonna want to turn around, go the other way. The canal's closed." Well, the Winslow had been notified of this situation. The captain comes on deck and yells, "To hell with you and your old clothesline." It just simply uses his big steamer to just pierce the rope and makes nothing of, doesn't even hesitate. Well, the guys are getting frustrated, but they string the rope a 3rd time. You know, comes a little tug called the Spirit. It's hauling a barge behind it. It's smaller, not as big and powerful as the Winslow, so it gets tangled up in the rope. It's all kind of tangled up, but the guys manage to cut themselves free, and out they go out into the lake. And the guys are realizing, well, this is just going to keep going this way. This plan isn't working. We need a better plan. What we need is some chain. The canal is 250 feet wide at that time. It's 300 now, but at that time it's 250 feet wide. The guys say we need some chain, but we can't afford 250 feet of chain. We can afford 18 feet of chain. So they go into a hardware store and they buy 18 feet of chain. Their plan is to tie the chain in the middle, have it out in the middle of the canal and man it, and have it out so everybody can see it. And when a boat comes, simply lower the weight of the chain just under the water line, so even a Winslow won't mess with that. Seems like a good plan. They just have to man it until everybody gets the message that the canal is closed. But they run out of time on the 15th of October, and they have to leave their equipment on their other side, go home, go to bed, come back the next morning, and we'll finish this job then. By the time they get here in the morning, the newspaper reporter had beat them down here. Previous day's fiasco had attracted people who stole the rope and chopped the chain up into souvenir links as souvenirs from the previous day's fiasco. So the guys say, well, we're out of ideas. We're not going to be successful in this. Bill threatens the company that owns the Winslow. He threatens the company of Duluth. Again, he's got some rights here he wants to exercise. But unfortunately, the canal's never closed again. Bill passes away 2 months later. In January of 1890, Wilhelm passes away of influenza, coincidentally, in New York. His family pursues the matter. The wife comes here in the spring, but in talking with the city of Duluth, they point her to the federal government. Says if you have a problem, go talk to them. It's their canal now. And she very likely, as best we can tell, just gave up at that point and said, I'm not going to fight the government over these 14 lots that probably isn't going to be worth my while. So the canal's been free and open ever since, until we put a bridge here that kind of has to go up and down. to get out of the way of the boats. Originally it went back and forth instead. If you didn't know that, I'll explain that in a second, but we're not done with Bill yet. Bill the first dies, because we know Bill, or at least we know his name. The whole civilized world knows Bill's name. There's nobody on the planet that is not familiar with Bill's name, because of his son, Bill. Wilhelm II, or Bill II, is 11 years old when this fiasco is going on here, and his father dies a couple months later. But his family's rich from the lumbering industry, later the iron ore industry. So he's educated in Europe. He's raised a wealthy kid. After his education, he decides to follow in his father's footsteps as a lumberman, heads west to follow the trees to the Pacific Northwest, where he makes even more money, harvesting those big trees. Settles in Seattle, 1910, 1911, as rich guys apt to do when they're wealthy. They develop interesting hobbies. And Bill develops an interesting hobby. He goes down to California to attend an air show where they're displaying this new invention, the airplane. And he buys a kit plane, figuring I got to do something with my spare time, brings it back up to Seattle, tries to put it together, has trouble, can't find parts for it when there's trouble, engages a friend of his who is an engineer to go into his little bright red barn that he has on his property and build their very first prototype, and Bill puts his name on the side of the plane, Boeing. Bill Boeing founded the Boeing Aircraft Company after his father tried to rope off our canal. Connection to the airline industry. Bill lives a long, obviously prosperous life as an airplane builder, and he's going to pass away in the 1950s, late 50s and his late 70s. He's going to die of a heart attack on his private yacht off the coast of Washington, and the name of the yacht, the Taconite.
Oh!
Ironically, you can imagine how I'm spelling that word ironically. But we're not done with Bill yet. He may pass away, but so fast forward to 2002. We build our hotel. You see this story. It's not very well researched. It even sounds a little suspicious when we read it. We're kind of fascinated by 14 lots on the same plat we're aware of the plat, and we look at the diagram and we can see where the 14 lots are. So we look into it. My brother says, well, I see there's a Boeing aircraft company built a museum out in Washington called the Museum of Flight. So Seattle, at least in that area. It's got the bright red barn replaced as the centerpiece of this museum. Looks like a great museum. So my brother calls out there and says, well, maybe somebody out there knows about this. Gets transferred around, gets a guy that'll listen to him, and he says, hi, my name's Steve, Duluth, Minnesota, Canal, Wilhelm, Boeing, rope, can you offer any help on that? And he says, well, Wilhelm Boeing was the father of the founder. That's true, but he says, I've never heard of a rope being stretched across any canal. But sounds interesting. Let me look into it. I'll get right back. I'll get back to you. Because that's all I can answer. Hangs up the phone. Fast forward 15 minutes. My brother's cell phone rings. He picks it up, says, hi, this is Steve. And on the other side, the guy says, Steve, Bill Boeing calling you back. Son of the founder, the grandson of Wilhelm, called my brother right back. Evidently, you mentioned somebody's grandfather, you get their attention. Yeah. I knew the curator of the museum, who immediately called him and said, do you know anything about your grandfather stringing a rope across the canal? And he called my brother back to say, my grandfather absolutely strung a rope across that canal. I'll send you some information on it, including the notice I read from, some other clippings. And he says, we're still friends with the Allworths, and we still own land in northern Minnesota. So we thought, I think that the story's true. And I've since looked it up on the 14th of October, the day before it goes across. It's actually on the cover of the New York Times. We'll close the canal. Bill was good at tweeting at the time. Yeah. He knew how to get the word out. But then now we have a bridge. I was mentioning the park pointers aren't happy. We dig the ditch. They're promised a bridge. 1873 financial wipes out Duluth. They never get their bridge. It's going to be 35 years while they're isolated over here. The ferry goes across in the summer, rickety temporary bridges in the winter when the boats aren't coming, but there's a lot of times of the year where there's ice and whatnot, you can't do either. This doesn't sit well with the poor park pointers who can't get into work for literally 4 months out of the year. Patchwork throughout the year, there's times you just can't cross the canal. So, in protest, we over here on Park Point secede from the city of Duluth in 1880. 1880? My date might be off. But anyway, we secede from the city because they're not bridging it. You obviously don't care enough about us. We're not going to pay into your coffers anymore. We're going to develop our own village. which we do, get recognized by the state legislature as the Village of Park Point, and exist for 10 years until the courts force us back into the city. But we have some wonderful ordinances, neighborhood specific at the time. We need some money, so let's get the liquor licenses going. You know, you got to start with the liquor license. It's usually the first order of any city's business is get the liquor licenses out there. If you own dogs, that's fine, but male dogs are $1 a year. Female dogs are $2 a year. 2 years into our village status, the coffers were overflowing with $8.60. Typical of the poor Park Point area. No more burying people on the beach. It's been frowned upon up until now. Now it's illegal. The problem was the winds would exhume the graves, so we kind of thought we better just codify that with a law. And can't bury in the Indian cemeteries anymore. Those aren't ours. The ferry operator, which he probably broke the law during the bill fiasco, the ferry operator is no longer allowed to swear on the job. That was a Park Point ordinance. But eventually the city of Duluth uses the courts to force Park Point back into its fold, but they still don't have a bridge. Move forward a little bit to 10 years later, finally a bridge is promised and going to be delivered upon. Not this bridge, this bridge. There's two bridges in front of us. There's the old bridge and the new bridge, intertwined between each other, or within each other. 1900 when this is designed, it's built in 1905. 1900 there's 2 automobiles in all of the city of Duluth. And there's 200 houses down on Park Point. A bridge like this is too expensive, too intricate. We don't need this. Tunneling is too expensive. We can't do that. The government says you can do whatever you want, but the boats have the right of way. The shipping industry is more important. So if you put something here or under here, that's fine. But when a boat goes through, you better not be there. So Duluth designs, a local engineer designs an aerial transfer bridge inspired by a bridge in France. And instead of a lift that goes up and down, it had a gondola car that basically hung from that top span with wheels and rolled across using that top span back and forth all day long. It would pull up to the ramp here, just like a ferry boat that you put a car on. Gates would open on one side, horses and people would get on, close the gates, push the lever, clickety-clickety-click across, you'd go to the other ramp, same thing, empty, refill, back and forth, back and forth. That satisfied the government's get out of the way when a boat comes through. It was actually designed to be perfectly flush with the outside of the pier when it was in the park position. You know, make it every inch you can. It was 60 feet long, carried 200 people. But fast forward to 1929, there's 20,000 cars in Duluth and 500 houses on Park Point, and a desire to develop the inner side of Park Point into a more commercial ventures. So that clickety-click gondola bridge wasn't going to cut it anymore. It took too long. It was getting old anyway. But it had served a purpose, but now we need a lift bridge that, again, has to be out of the way when the boats are coming. And for the new demand of cars, and there was a streetcar at the time that actually went across this originally, they converted it to a lift bridge. Got rid of the gondola and put a span in here and had to rebuild the towers. They're very busy. You see a lot of steel going on in there. That's because there's an old outer part of the bridge and a new inner part of the bridge. You can kind of see there's an inner working and an outer working there. But back to that rule that the government says you have to be out of the way of the boats, that means out of the way and out of the way. And the specification was 135 feet when the gondola was going back and forth. Fine, you can put a lift bridge there, but that 135-foot rule is still in place. You got to be 135 feet off the water when a boat goes through. So you add this 40-foot lift span in the middle of that old space, you're not going to have 135 feet anymore when it's in the up position. So in 1929, with 4 steam cranes in 2 hours a time, they had to raise that entire top of the bridge 40 feet. And you can kind of see the outer angle, goes only angled so far and then straightens out at the top on the towers on both sides. That straight part on the top was added in 1929. They added the higher towers and then cranked the bridge up 40 feet and set it on its new legs. So now when the bridge is up and sits in that new space that's created, you've got your 135 feet back, 138 to be specific. So we call this the one-of-a-kind world-famous aerial lift bridge. There's no other one like it in the world. The one that was designed over in France actually had cables across the top, not a rigid span. It was destroyed in World War II, sabotaged in World War II. But you will go all over the world and find lift bridges, Houghton, Hancock, Stillwater, Chicago Rivers. There's lifts and towers. You never have a top on them. That's because none of them were an aerial transfer bridge originally that had to carry that car back and forth. And on a clear day, on that very lowest rung, there's two parallel rungs that rung both ways. If you're ever here on a clear day, look, you'll see a crevice, a dark crevice in the bottom of those rails. Those are the old tracks for the old gondola where the wheels rode in. They're covered on three sides for the weather to keep the ice and stuff off the wheels. And to this day, I like to point out that if you're ever stuck at the bridge, which side are you on? You're either on the Duluth side or the Park Point side. As much as this is Duluth, we don't refer to it that as far as the canal is concerned. But anyway, that's why we claim it's world famous. It's obvious our biggest landmark. Oh, I forgot right while we're here. Talked about shipwrecks. There's 350 out there. There's one right here. Here? Right here. On a clear day, in other years, not this year or last year, you can see it. It's about 30 feet off right from where I'm standing here.
Which means it's now
under the sand. And not much of it is exposed on a good year, but on a good year when it's calm and the sun is just right, you can see a jumble of timbers out there. And it's an 1885 shipwreck. It's a 3-inch schooner that was hauling coal. Back then you didn't have a motor. You relied on a tug to bring you in. So you would sail up the lake, throw a rope to a tug or vice versa, and then you would go to your dock. A storm was brewing. Getting started, and there was a mishap with that rope. The rope was missed. The fister was going too fast, missed the canal, or purposely missed the canal in an attempt to go around and take the fish and come back. In his attempt to go around and get the raft too. Everybody survived. Everybody gets out using the rope onto this pier. But at the beginning of the storm, they can't get the boat off the rocks. By the time the storm is over, the ship is a total loss. And my favorite part is the newspaper that reports on it. Says the Guido Pfister wrecked off at Park Point, fully laden with coal, to which nearby Park Pointers gleefully helped themselves.
Wait a minute. How deep is the water here?
It's on a regular year. This is an unusual year because of that beach renourishment. When you I go snorkeling on it now and then. When you stand on the Pfister, you're this much above water. When you're next to the Pfister, you're underwater about this, so whatever that is, 6-7 feet or so. But it's
so they were able to go ahead and get all of the coal?
Well, Park Pointers gleefully helped themselves.
Did they get all of it? Because I know what coal does to water. It is not a pretty sight.
They did, because it's so shallow and easy to get to. They did salvage the remainder off of it. It was an insurance claim and all that, and you always go get the cargo off and sort out the finances after the fact as best you can. But they took the coal off. But I'm sure they didn't get every ounce of it off. I like to think you find coal on the beach fairly often.
How much coal was on board that schooner?
1885. I'm taking kind of a guess at
20
4 tons, maybe 4 tons. It was a 195 foot boat. It's got 3 masts on it, so its cargo holds are limited.
Not like the ships that carry coal today.
No, they got the 60,000. Well, I don't know what
4
coal
tons.
is, but
4 tons of coal.
Yeah, 4 tons.
That's
of coal.
still a lot.
Yeah.
But
well,
I'm
it's
sure.
a wheelbarrow. It's a wheelbarrow.
You're throwing a couple of buckets as you're hauling right down.
Every able-bodied man, woman, and child down here. But Park Point has that, and again, legends and truth, and flying. That's a newspaper report of the day. Claims that, and I'm sure it's true. I have a friend. He's passed away now. His name is Jim. One of his roof rafters in his house has the name of the ship that the rafter came from. The ladder. It's got the holes in the back. It goes along with our legend on Park Point that every time a ship wrecks off Park Point, somebody gets an addition to their house. And that's not completely untrue. There's a lot of shipwrecks here, mostly scuttled boats called the boneyard. Back when your boat was done, no more use for it, you bring it out to the boneyard, burn it to the water line, and let it sink. So there's numerous ones, including the most famous one at the other end that you can see on a good year. You have to step over it on the beach. It's the USS Essex, a World War I Navy ship that was scuttled, and we used to go down there as kids and pry the little draft washers off it. So we got a lot of lighthouses. We've got 1 canal, 2 piers, and 1, 2, 3 lighthouses. Seems like somebody might have had a brother in the lighthouse building business for the federal government, or there's a reason for that madness. And that's where my sticks come in. I've used them a couple times. But I can explain why there's 3 lighthouses, and I'll start by saying when these piers were built in 1901, they only bothered with 2 lighthouses. They're expensive, they're an engineering deal. The federal government says 2 is enough. You would assume it's these 2, but it was actually these 2. This is an afterthought. This is going to come after a storm 10 years later. That's built in 1910. These are built in 1900, so they're 10 years apart. But I'll use current conditions to explain why that's the case using my sticks here. We've got a green light at the end of the South Pier. We've got a red light over on the North Pier. The white light on the inner South Pier. So if you're out in the fog like today, or pitch black at night, you really rely on those lights. They have a certain pattern, you know which ones they are and whatnot. And my sticks show the green light of the South Pier and the red light of the North Pier, and they mark the end of the channel and where to go. So if you're in a little fishing boat, simply go between those 2 lights and you'll be fine. But 1900 ships are about 400 up to 450 feet long at that time. They're 1,000 feet long now. But so imagine you're in a 400-foot freighter in the dark in a storm, and all you can see are the lights. Maybe you're looking at this. Maybe you're looking at this. It looks the same to you. This looks exactly the same as this. And if you're in a 400-foot freighter, there's a rule in the navigating of oarboat businesses that nothing happens fast in an oarboat. There's one exception to that I'll get to later, but nothing happens fast in an oarboat. So if you simply go between these 2 lights in a big oarboat, you're coming in the wrong direction. Things are going to go bad in a hurry when you get between those lights, unlike that fishing boat that can straighten itself out. You can't straighten yourself out in an oarboat on a dime. So you're going to hit the North Pier if you're coming from your direction. Or maybe you're coming from this direction. You're lost, you're in the fog, you don't know where you're at. It's very important to know ahead of time, well ahead of time in an oarboat, which direction you're coming. So, in comes the 3rd inner pier light. And now this is bad. You wait until that green and that white light line up perfectly, one above the other. And when you're in that condition, now you know you're lined up with the pier. This is bad, that's good. This is 78 feet above the water, that's 63 feet above the water. They were built at the same time to create a range light system that lines the boat up 1 or 2 miles out, or wherever you can see those lights, you can line yourself up and slide right through the canal in the darkest of conditions.
In conditions like this, how far out can a ship actually see those lights?
You can't see them very far. There's a fog signal, the audible fog signal. We're not hearing it now. Only dogs can hear it. No. Every ship has to have a dog on it from now on. It's not as annoying for us. There's another story. Every time we change the foghorn, that part of the city complains because it's a new sound and they don't build them right. But there's a fog signal to help a little bit, but you go really, really slow, and you use your compasses and you wait till you can see the lights. GPS nowadays is heavily relied on. It wouldn't have been there originally. When the piers are built.
Do we know? Sorry. No. Do we know when radar actually got on board the ships? Was that between 1 and 2, or was it after World War II?
That's a good question. Sounds like a World War II invention to me.
It was, but that was part of the thing, is our planes had radar and the Germans didn't. Neither did the Japanese near the end of the World War II.
Right, yep. And Hawaii had the primitive radar on the north of the coast when the Japanese were coming, and they barely relied on it.
Given how many years we were building metal ships, that means that you still had a ton of steel ships that still couldn't navigate through here.
Well, they could navigate.
We're talking a 250-foot vessel.
Sure. Yeah, you mean like in bad conditions in that, or in the dark, or just in general?
In general.
Oh, they would rely on tugs a lot. Like the Pfister would always rely on a tug, and they still do. A foreign boat that comes in, or a salty that comes in that doesn't know the harbor, they'll hire 2 tugs to actually get a rope on both ends of the boat, and they'll bring them right into the dock. They'll help them out. And tug business was huge when I was a kid. Every boat would use tugs.
That gave those steel ships a lot of safety coming through here.
Exactly. And then later, bow thrusters came into the big ships. Now have propellers on the front of the boat in a tube. So now you got the engine in the back, and you can control your bow with a bow thruster. Makes a huge difference. And so you'll see a big 1,000-footer come in here flying. I mean, literally, you say, why is that boat going so fast? He'll start turning while he's still under the pier because he's got a bow thruster that can push his bow around, and then he can move around the dock using his two propellers and his bow thruster.
The Masabi miner was doing that this morning. I could see the turn already happening before it had finished.
Yeah, it doesn't
going.
even get under the bridge and they start turning. It kind of makes me a little queasy when that big 1,000-foot boat, because every now and then one will kiss a pier. Last year the Presque Isle, 1,000-footer, kissed that pier over by the by that little tugboat over there. He lost his bow thruster. He's on his way out.
Oh,
Not quite as bad as the Suez Canal.
Right. Yeah.
that was bad.
And then, you know, everybody had to be
1,000-foot boat that gets wedged in here.
It happened.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I know it's good. I'm just like, you know, that's just a little bit bigger.
Right. Yeah. That was something. And all the related problems that it causes.
Oh yeah, like you said, closest to water. Well, suddenly you have to go around the horn of it.
Basically clogged the whole artery.
So our biggest storm, 1905 in Duluth, we call it the Mataafa storm. If you're ever up at Split Rock Lighthouse and take that tour up there, they might call it the Mataafa storm, or they may at least refer to the Mataafa. 29 ships go down in one storm. They either sink or severely damaged. 36 sailors die. And it's all on this end of Lake Superior. It's a concentrated storm. It's a storm that's going to cause this light to be built. It's going to cause Split Rock Lighthouse to be built. There's another one at the end of Park Point that was built because of that storm, and one off of Isle Royal, all because of that one storm. It's you know, there's a lot of reactionary things. You know, when problems happen, they say, okay, we need more aids to navigation, so that's why that one's added. But the Mataafa storm is our most famous ship, or the Mataafa is our most famous shipwreck. It's going to wreck right across from us on the other side of the North Pier. It's 430 feet. It's a state-of-the-art steamer at the time. It's 1905. It's going to head out unwittingly into a storm, following kind of a similar to the Edmund Fitzgerald. Last run of the year, ignore the storm warnings. Captains know better than the weatherman. Late November, all that kind of gangs up on ships. You know, there's estimated 350 boats at the bottom of Lake Superior. A lot of them are succumbed to that same thing. Back then, captains were paid bonuses to make one more run, to get over their anxiety. They would get paid for it. It's illegal now, but that's the situation in 1905. And there's a lot of unique things about it. Why so many ships succumb to it. The storm passes earlier. That keeps all these boats at bay for that last run. They've got to wait out this storm. So everybody's in port, waiting out the storm, waiting out the storm. The storm passes, and they say, let's go. We're not making any money at the dock. It's time to go. One more ship, or one more run to make. Weatherman is saying, no, not so fast. There's a storm coming. On the top of the hill, we had one of the first weather stations in the country. There was 13 in the country, and we had one of them. He's flying both red flags. He's got 2 red flags as his biggest warning, trying to tell people, don't go out on the lake, as he just helplessly watches all these ships head out into the storm. Because the captains believe they had 10 days between a storm. The storm passes, we've got 10 days between storms. No, maybe they're right, maybe they're not wrong.
It didn't happen.
It didn't happen in this case because they didn't anticipate the same storm coming twice. It's what they call a retrograde storm. I had to look that up when I read it. But it means the storm passed Duluth, went out in the lake, and came back. So they were unknowingly heading into the same storm that had already passed it in reverse directions. And they didn't see this coming. So they head out. The Mataafa is a state-of-the-art 430-foot steamer. Technology that day limited to about that size. Docks and locks and loading and all that. It's a chicken and the egg thing. Boats get bigger, docks get longer. Which one goes first is anybody's guess. But anyway, 430 feet is the size of boats at the time. But the engine's a good deal powerful enough to tow another boat behind it with a 6-inch rope, 1,000 feet long. You know, this sort of apparatus pushing 2,000 feet, both full of iron ore. This has got no motor on it, just a tiller. They have all this space so that they can correct for problems. If there's a problem, they can steer away, so there's a lot of buffer in there. Not a good rig in the middle of a big storm. Biggest one that we'd seen up until that day. 1905. It heads out unknowingly, full of iron ore, 1,000-foot rope, heading out into the lake as the storm's coming back. They get as far as 2 harbors, 25 miles from here. They start hitting the storm hard, just getting pounded to pieces. 10 hours later, they're still just outside of 2 harbors, not making any headway. So the captain has to make a tough decision to turn all 2,000 feet sideways, risking being capsized, and these northeasters that are coming, and he somehow manages to keep the boats afloat on his way to Two Harbors. Approaches Two Harbors, says this is too big for Two Harbors. It's a small little harbor in there if you've ever been there. Not going to work. Let's turn the whole thing for Duluth and make a run for Duluth. Now we got following seas. You got a lot less control in a following sea because you and the water are kind of moving at the same speed. Your tiller doesn't do a whole lot. Getting close, the captain makes another decision. He says, we got to cut the Naismith. Oh, the James Naismith was the name of the barge. You have to cut that free 2 miles out. Let a small crew of these guys anchor, weather the storm as best they can. Good luck, fellas. We're not going to be successful we're going to be lucky to get our boat through this canal. We're probably not going to get you through there in these following seas. It's really tough to control a towing situation. So the Naismith anchors off. That crew is going to be fine. Frostbit, cold, and hungry the next day, but they're going to be fine. Not so much for half the crew of the Mataafa. Mataafa lines itself up to make a run for the canal. You imagine this is the North Pier over there, and here comes the Mataafa as it's coming in. It gets right between the two pier heads, all 430 feet, if you can imagine the size of the boat in front of us. Gets bow right between the two pier heads, and a following sea lifts the back of the boat up so high that the bow digs into the bottom of the canal. Boom. All that iron ore, all that ship comes to a complete stop. That rudder bends into the propeller, shears off all blades of the propeller. He's got no more power and no more control. He's nothing but a canoe, as somebody told me once. Stuck in the mud, minus 35-degree weather, sustained 60-mile-an-hour winds, gusts to 85, seas crashing over the piers, and he's stuck in the mud at the mercy of the winds and the currents. It spins around, it T-bones the North Pier, and cracking the boat in half. So now cracked in half with no control, it keeps spinning around all 430 feet of it until it ends up right across from us, kind of at an angle. Its bow into the bottom, and the back slowly cracking, trying to find the bottom itself as the stern's setting down. There's no cabins on the back of the boat at the time. There's just a smokestack in the vents. All the cabins are below. Those are filling with water. As the crack's getting bigger, only 3 guys manage to get across the crack in time. 9 are left on the back to just hide behind the smokestack all night long. As the waves are pounding this thing, they're chopped out of the ice in the morning. You know, all 9 of them perish back there. The guys in the front manage to burn parts of the cabins, the beds and the doors and whatnot to stay warm, because nobody can get out to them in these waves. And what made it really dramatic is thousands of people are watching this happen. Throughout the day, all these boats that have gone out are coming back because they're hitting this unexpected storm, so they're being pushed hydraulically almost right back into port. Earlier in the day, the Ellsworth, the 280-foot steamer, bounces off the North Pier. Following seas are really tough to navigate. I was trying to make that point, but the Ellsworth hits the North Pier, ricochets into the South Pier, makes its way into the harbor and sinks to the bottom. Later in the day, the England pulls a Guido Pfister. He's out of control. He misses the canal completely, tries to do a loop around and gets stranded off of Park Point, beaches himself. Our one and only life-saving crew went to help that boat. When the Mataafa crashes over here, the gondola bridge is brand new. 1905, it's a brand new bridge. They don't want to screw up the bridge, so they tie that, lash that to the north tower of the bridge so it doesn't swing in the wind. The life-saving crew is isolated. They can't get back in any light of the day. They have to use barges to get their equipment across to finally get to the Mataafa, but they run out of day. And so the Mataafa has to sit there and get pounded to pieces all night long. And they are able to rescue the guys the following morning, but it's too late for the guys in the back. In front of thousands of people that had come down to watch it, and they had bonfires holding vigil. There's a really good picture of that T-bone. If you type Mataafa in the internet, you can see this. There's one lifeboat, and it was down there on the wrong side of the canal.
On the ship.
Oh, on the ship? No, no lifeboats.
Ship?
No lifeboats on the ship. No. No lifeboats on the ship, and no way to communicate from one. If you ever see pictures of ships from after that period or something, you'll often see a cable running from the back of the ship to the front of the ship. That was put in after the storm as a response to a way to get from one end to the other if you had to, because there was no way to get across. And one of the pictures of the Mataafa, as it's sitting there and waves are hitting it, you can see a guy running across the deck. You know, it's that kind of eerie from 1905, real grainy picture, but you can see the guy, you know, running. But the drama gives it the name of the Mataafa storm. It's our most famous shipwreck. And it all kind of happened right over there. Yeah, hopefully there's something in here that's of interest. If there's such thing as a bright side to the Mataafa story, it's the way it's salvaged. It sits there through the winter. It's stuck there, but come spring they say, okay, I've got to get rid of the Mataafa. You know, the owner of the boat wants to rebuild it. It is going to be rebuilt. It's going to live a long life and be finally scrapped in Germany in 1965, so it's going to live for 60 more years. But at the time it's stuck over there, broke in half, a tricky wreck to get fixed. They sink out in the lake, you just leave them there, there's not much you can do. But if a situation like this, simply go alongside of it, empty the cargo, put a temporary patch on the hull, pump out the water, the boat will float enough to drag it in and get it fixed. So that's a simple plan, but the matop has a huge crack in it, so it's a little tricky. So first they take cables and tie it from one end of the boat to the other and use winches to try to squeeze it back together. It helps a little bit, but not enough to close the gap. They've emptied the cargo. Now they use timbers, and they line the side of the boat where the crack is on both sides and lash it all together to try to get some suction going on there. Hit the pumps, nothing happens. So then they take a canvas, put that on top of the timbers to make a better band-aid. They hit the pumps again. The ship starts rocking on the bottom, but it won't float. But they're getting somewhere. They're getting a little bit of motion going on here, so we're headed in the right direction, but it's not enough. Canal Park at the time is a very seedy part of town, lined with horse stables and other seedy establishments, but horse stables are abundant. So Captain Taylor, I think was the guy's name, was hired to salvage it, sends his guys into Canal Park to grab all the horse manure and hay they can. And they mix up a big batch of hay-reinforced horse manure. They take the canvas off and they pack all those timbers with horse crap. And then put the canvas back on, which is enough of a band-aid to create a suction that they can pump the matapa empty with water and float it over to the docks in Superior. And that's where
I hope they got a bonus for that.
definitely a creative gold star. But they use horse manure to float it. They bring it over to Fraser. It's now Fraser Shipyards to repair it. Captain Taylor says, "There's your boat. Make the check out to me." And the guy said, well, no, you got to bring it in the dry dock. And well, that's a whole nother operation. I bid it to bring it to the dry dock. They said, no, we're paying you to put it in the dry dock. And while they hashed this out, the manure disintegrated and the matapa sunk at the dock. Didn't make it to the dry dock until they staged another. That's shitty. More swearing going on.
We're not the captain, ferry captain or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know how far that swearing. He couldn't swear and he couldn't drink.
Like ever?
Given how famous sailors are for drinking whenever they're underway,
Yeah.
that could not have been easy.
Yeah.
Well, swear like a sailor became a moniker.
Right, exactly. Almost as bad as swearing like a ferry operator. So nobody ever lived in this lighthouse. Why it's built like a house, other than it contained foghorn equipment. As the sign says, it doesn't operate anymore now. You have to listen to it on the radio. I don't understand how it works, but you won't hear it anymore. The long sorted.
What was it I just heard a couple of minutes ago?
There was a sound.
Oh, what? I didn't hear it. Hopefully
I
it goes
did.
again.
I didn't either.
It sounded like it was over there somewhere.
Was it kind of a loud boop sound, or because that's kind of what the foghorn
Well, pay
sounds
attention
like.
if we hear
so
it
hear
again.
Okay.
It wasn't loud, not by a long
Okay.
shot.
They used to come out of this building, and it was a real high pitched. For a while, it was the Uruga, which is really cool, old foghorn and all that. That was a political football. But long story. It's now in Colorado. The guy took his ball and went home. The guy who owned the foghorn said, "The heck with you," because Duluth wouldn't pay to fix it or something. Fine, and it's now guiding ships in Colorado.
There's lots of them
what
there.
else do you do with a foghorn? I don't know.
Well, let's bring it down.
But so we got a lighthouse here, but nobody ever lived in it. It's just sort of a hollowed out concrete industrial building. I've only seen pictures of it. The lighthouse keeper lived in Foggy, so you can't see it. The fourth house over, it's a gray house with kind of a rounded window that you can almost see, white trim. But he lived there anyway. That house was built in the 1890s. So he would live there, and he would manage the lighthouses by coming out originally on an elevated walkway. When the piers were made out of wood before that 1900 piers where the lighthouses were built, he would have to come out here on a raised walkway because in a storm you got to be out of the waves. Especially that wooden one was slippery, it was lower, it was impossible to walk on. So they build these new piers, and they have the same problem. You still got to get out here. They used acetylene at the time to burn the flame. And the light would spin on basically a grandfather clock mechanism where you had to reset the weight every now and then so that the gravity would carry the chains, and then you'd reset the weight. and it would keep the light spinning. No more important time than in a storm to get out here. So when they built these piers, they didn't want to do an elevated walkway. You can kind of see like that orange railing right there, how mangled it is on the left there.
Yeah.
That's what nature does to steel, so any sort of elevated walkway was probably going to have trouble. During that Matapa storm, 18 light poles were sheared off, during that storm. The steel light poles bolted to the bridge, and they're just, you'll see pictures around of the Matapa, and they're missing all the light poles, because through ice and wind and logs and whatnot. But anyway, they didn't want to do an elevated walkway. So what they incorporated was a tunnel in the pier, and it's eerily still down there. It was virtually never used, but it's in the pier. It was for the lighthouse keeper to get out here in a storm. They said, well, let's tunnel through here, and it's got a curved top and a flat bottom, a little narrow gauge railroad, and he sat on a belly car and used his hands to wheel himself up this entire long pier, and he'd pop up inside this lighthouse. Claustrophobia need not apply.
That's all I'm thinking.
Right, yeah.
On the belly card.
One of those creepers
And
from
they're
the...
20 feet short.
And the problem was, and it was during the Matapa storm, it filled with water. In a big storm and the lake winds, that makes this end of the lake higher. The force of the water makes this lake elevated. Concrete's not very waterproof, especially 1900 concrete's not very waterproof, so it was full of water. And they immediately capped it off to keep anybody from getting in trouble and then getting stuck. Like you say, getting all this way, and then you can't go forward, can't go back. But the tunnel's still under there, because in 1985 they built these piers on top of the old piers. They got rid of the walls, put sheet piling out wider, and then just kind of like a tooth capped the old piers with the new concrete piers that we're on now. But it's down there someplace in some form.
One question before we go too much farther.
Yeah.
Are there any webcams that show the raising and the lowering of the bridge?
The real good one that looks out from the Marine Museum looks out this way, so you see boats coming and going. But from the bridge, we have one on our hotel that I don't know if it's working right now. I saw our manager was up on the roof yesterday. He might have been working on it. But I'll ask if ours is working, and that looks from our hotel at the bridge, so you can kind of see it going up and down. I know the camera's up there, but I don't know if it's working.
So we may be able to see the ships coming in.
Yeah, and there is one over on Pier B, the hotel that's kitty corner across from us. They have a cam of some sort, maybe on their cement towers over there. So if you look up Pier B webcam, you might find one that looks at the bridge this way. We might have one. The best one is at the Marine Museum. It's really, every year it seems to get better. It's really clear. You can see people walking. It's not that stop motion type stuff. You miss all of a sudden somebody disappears in front of you.
Yeah, there's one over there. I've seen it because you can see the little boat in the camera view too.
And that's a real good one. My brother has a VRBO, and he's got a big screen TV, and when you check in, it's got that camera on the big screen TV. Is sort of a, here you are in Duluth. It's down 2 miles down. It's really clear. It's on a big screen, and it's really clear. It's called the Lake Superior Maritime Museum.
Yeah, their cam is really good. Yeah, probably HD.
But it does look at the bridge.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that done?
Yeah, I don't like this graffiti on
Yeah, it's
here.
all new as of about a week ago. Really dressing up the place. There was old stuff there, but this new stuff.
Oh yeah, somebody cleaned it. Somebody else decides their artistic expression.
Right, yeah, I guess it's job security for somebody. These two holes used to be the foghorns. Look like almost two trumpets that stuck out there. There's brackets on the wall, all sorts that did their best to keep Duluth from getting the horn blown out all the time.
There's a sign talking about the electronic foghorn signal right up there.
Yeah, somehow, and I don't understand how that works yet. I haven't looked into it, but that's the new foghorn. I joke that it's
There's a pigeon looking at us through there.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Modern technology. And then one thing about lighthouses, they're highly engineered. There's more to them than you think. These engineers really go crazy. Windowsills are designed in certain ways. So it was mostly about the heat that was generated from the original flames and all that. But on a more simple level, you've got their light pattern. That one's off in the daytime, but I think it flashes like once every 4 seconds or something like this one. This one's constant on, green. The white one is, I think, every 5 seconds it's on for 1 second. And the charts will say that. The charts will tell you what it's called, its characteristic. Lighthouses have a characteristic. And that tells you which lighthouse. It's very easy to be at the other end of the point looking at the wrong lighthouse that's flashing red and green. You need to know which red and green lighthouse it is by the pattern of its light. Less known, less cared about, or less important, but it can be important depending, is what's called its day mark, which is its color scheme. You'll always see lighthouses have a real simple, easy to describe in a quick sentence color scheme. White base, red roof, black base, white middle, black lantern. The inside one is black base, white lantern. Just enough to describe it, to differentiate it from ones at the other end of the air, where it might be black on the top, white on the bottom, type of thing. And that's so in the daytime, when you're lost and confused, and the lights aren't visible or operating, you know which lighthouse you're looking at by its day mark. So it's just a little subtle thing why they always have this real simple paint scheme, so it's easily and quickly identified and differentiated from other ones. But yeah, the way they handle heat and all that from all the ones in the United States that I've ever seen have a big ball on the top. It's not just a flourish or a fancy lightning rod. It is a lightning rod, but it's the chimney. It's the chimney of a lighthouse. It's called a heat ball or a heat dissipation ball. There's holes underneath it. The heat of that old lamp, it's not heated now, would go up through that ball and get dissipated out the bottom of the holes, and in a 360-degree fashion would dissipate the heat. The window sills are extra wide and shallow. They would catch the condensation, just enough condensation to evaporate the next day. You know, they had that engineered down to the ounce of how to build these things. And again, the way these two work together and their heights and whatnot and the angles. But anyway, I forgot to mention in the very beginning that we're going to come across 7 things on the National Register of Historic Places. Probably a good day to not to mention it because 2 of them aren't visible. Well, 3 of them aren't visible actually, but there's that ore boat, the tour boat, the William A. Irvin, that's on the National Register. I'm working my way this way. The bridge is number 2. That inner lighthouse is number 3. There's a Duluth Sites building in the middle of Canal Park that has a Vietnamese restaurant in it. That's number 4. That lighthouse is number 5. This lighthouse is number 6. Working my way this way, I must find the other one out here. 9/10 of a mile straight out, a little bit off to the right, and 60 feet down is our second most famous shipwreck on the National Register, the Thomas Wilson. The Wilson goes down in 1902. It's a state-of-the-art. It's a 9-year-old boat at the time, full of iron ore. It doesn't go out in the end of November, ignoring the storm warnings. Mother Nature carrying the day. It's an early June day, not a cloud in the sky, barely a ripple on the lake. He's going to clear the end of these piers full of iron ore and be at the bottom of the lake in 11 minutes in a perfectly sound boat. And part of the reason it's on the register is it sits there very well preserved. You can go visit it. You can dive down there in 60 feet of water, find the tools right where they were left. It's nearly perfectly intact with a couple of exceptions, sitting upright, right underneath all the other ships that are passing over it every day, kind of eerily. And it's also on the register for the manner in which it sunk, or the event that sunk it. Not Mother Nature, human nature, and we've got 2 boats involved. So you have the Thomas Wilson, which was a unique boat built over in Superior, a whaleback ship, if you're familiar with the whalebacks. It was a ship that was basically shaped like a cigar, and it kind of went through the water rather than on the water, kind of like a submarine. They called it a whaleback because water would wash over it, like you see when a whale comes up out of the water washes over it. It was really good for towing, like the Naismith could have, it wasn't, but they didn't have that wind shear. They would travel through the water, and they would tow really well. And they had other good features, but one of their bad features is they sat really low in the water. This is going to have 2 problems for the Thomas Wilson. One, it's a little bit harder to see because it sat really low even on a nice day. Just had a pilot house in the back, virtually nothing on the front. Shaped like a cigar, pointed on both ends and round. I tried to round this one out a little bit. But anyway, the Thomas Wilson is on its way out. The George Hadley's on its way in. You pass port to port, left side to left side. That's just the rules of the road, like on a highway. It happens all the time. Right in front of us, coming in from the canal, and that's real important to do that. The George Hadley is full of coal. A little tug rushes out on its way in. This is a nice morning. Tug comes out and informs the Hadley that your coal dock is full in Duluth. You're going to want to go down to the Superior entry and unload over there. Captain claims he took a quick look and didn't see the low-riding Thomas Wilson that was coming like this, So he starts turning. Nothing happens fast in an oarboat. So he just starts turning. The Thomas Wilson sees this happening, assumes it's a swerve, not a turn. Thinks about going around it this way, but worries that he's going to wreck on the North Shore, hit the rocks. So he doesn't avoid the turn in the opposite direction. He figures he'll go around the swerve. The swerve turns into a turn, and it's another T-bone situation where nothing happens fast. Once that started, the die was cast. The Thomas Wilson's shaped kind of like a cigar and rides low in the water. The Hadley rides up on top of it, nearly cutting it in half near the back. Mistake number 7 we're probably at is he pulls out of the impact spot, backs out right away, leaving a huge gash in the ship. A steel ship full of rocks. There's only one thing an oarboat does fast, is finds the bottom. So he leaves a huge gash in the boat, but if you can imagine the cigar as he backs out also rolls the ship with him. So he's pulling the Thomas Wilson towards him. On a beautiful June morning, let's just put those hatches on underway. Let's not wait at the dock until all our hatches are on. So he has these huge hatch openings still open, not covered yet, over the cargo. So he pulls the boat and submerging all those hatches. And so from impact to bottom of the lake is 3 minutes. That's what an oarboat does fast. It's not like a Titanic that has all this air in it and takes a long time to sink. There's not a lot of freeboard, especially in a Wilson that sits so low in the water. Just a little bit of water will do it, and if you fill it that fast, do a gash in those open hatches. Down it goes. 9 guys are sleeping down below, working the night shift because it's the morning. They're not able to get out in time. The ship's, like the lifeboat thing, they don't have communication to all parts of the ship to say, hey, everybody off. After that point, they do have communication to all parts of the ship in a reaction.
That's when they finally put the 1MC all over the ship.
What is that, the communication wires? Okay. And that they claim that the accident did 4 things. One, you have to have communication to all parts of the ship. At least the port of Duluth requires. That's kind of just common sense now, but back then you needed to make a rule about it. Got to have communication to all parts of the ship. If you impact another ship, stay there. Don't back out of the impact spot until we sort things out. That's number 2. Number 3 is your hatches have to be on before you leave the port. You'll hear them. You'll hear the clamps going on as it passes out these piers. You clink, clink, clink. You'll hear it mostly coming in when they're taking them off. You might hear it on their way out. Those have to be on ahead of time. You can't do it out on the lake even on a nice day. And then the last one is a helmsman is now required to inform the ordering officer of an obstruction and not say, captain told me to turn, so I turned. Because the pilot guy says, I saw the Wilson, but cap orders are orders. Figured he knew what he was doing. We had enough time. From now on, the guy steering the boat is required to inform the person, do you know I'm about to hit something, rather than just take the order. If he says, yes, I know we're going to hit something, then you can turn the boat, but not until then. So those things
begs the question: why didn't either captain go ahead and just simply pull off on the power in order to give themselves more time?
I'm guessing.
Of course, then again, you're talking about a ship underway. A ship underway. Even if you pull back on the power, it's going to take a while to slow down.
That's that nothing happens fast on an oarboat. There's the captain of a 1,000-footer that told me that, or I didn't tell me, I saw it on a video. Captain of a 1,000-footer said nothing happens fast on an oarboat, and that's kind of thing. Once that started happening, it was just
so
slow motion.
Given that we're talking about a 1,000-foot oarboat, at least today.
Yep.
How many miles out do they have to cut back on the power in order to slow it to 5 knots in the channel?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. You'll see different boats traveling different speeds. The fastest one you'll happen to see is the Tregurtha. We're actually my brother's friends with the captain of that one, Captain Bob, and he knows the harbor so well. And for whatever reason, he comes in hot. He comes in faster than you think is safe. When he comes in, you think there's no way he's going to stop this ship by the time he gets to the dock over there. But they can fire reverse, they can hit the reverse, and they got the bow thrusters and all that. But so he's really fast. Now, Canadian boats living on Park Point, we hate Canadian boats because the bridge goes up 1.25 miles when they're about 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles out. And if it's a Canadian boat, you're going to be there a while. For some reason, the Canadian captains are in no hurry, so they're just creeping along. And you're sitting in your car and you see it in front of the bridge. You go down, you read the internet for a while, look back, and he's still at the bridge. And you think, is he even moving at all? But So every captain's different, the speeds of the boat are different, using that reverse and your ability to navigate the harbor.
Coming out to a boat in order to safely navigate, because I was pulling into Virginia Beach when I was in the Navy, but
Okay.
I certainly had my, I've been on the bridge and the captain comes on board and, you know, they know how to pilot the boat.
Yep.
They know that they know the port.
Yep, exactly.
Obviously.
If you
So
ever
I'm assuming that every captain, the ones that are familiar with this port, are going to be coming in hot, just like you said.
Yep, yep.
But for the ones that are coming in here for the first time,
Exactly,
or a
yep.
handful of times, I'm guessing 5 knots may be fast.
That would still be fast, even. I think those Canadian boats creep along at 2 or 3. And now if it's a salty, you know, a boat that's completely unfamiliar, maybe never been here before, they both have and are required to have a local captain on board. So if you ever see a salty, they park out here, waiting for their dock or waiting for their cargo. Or
That's what we saw yesterday. Yeah.
He was either waiting for the dock to get ready, maybe doing some paperwork or whatever, but before he, as long as his anchor is on the bottom, he can sit there without a captain on board. As soon as that anchor leaves the bottom, there's got to be a local captain on board. So ahead of time, you'll see a little blue and yellow boat go out. The big word pilot on the side.
That's what we saw.
Yeah!
That's exactly
Yeah,
right.
He goes out. He's $350 an hour, so they're not going to pay him to sit there while the anchor's down. So he comes out, starts making this $350 an hour, and he's the guy that helps them navigate the channels and get in here. And if they're really concerned, they'll use tugs. If they really want to.
Yeah, there was a tug guiding it in this morning.
Was there?
That salty that was here. I can't pronounce the name, but
Right, yeah,
she was brought. Yeah.
Puppies, or is this just,
I'm not sure.
Sorry, I was trying to warn you. But
You missed it.
puppy landmine, but you missed it.
Oh,
Call them the puppy landmines.
yeah. Yeah, that one.
Nature does. That's not thin steel there. That's
I saw that this morning and wondered what happened.
Question though.
Yeah.
Given how important the commerce is to this city, why did St. Paul become the capital?
Yeah, you could equally ask why did Minneapolis.
I don't know.
Wait, what's that?
Or no, yeah, as far as the mill city and that.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like, there's a lot of it's tough to learn the capital of the states because they throw you curveballs every now. Cities you've never heard of are the capital of Idaho or whatever. You've heard of Boise, but that's not the capital. Helena, I don't even know what it is.
Helena is Montana.
It's Montana. Yeah. There's my geography not creeping in. So yeah, so in Duluth, Allworth Building is over there. Is 1910. We don't peak in 1910. We plateau in 1910 for about 50 years. So we don't have this rise and crash. We rise up to that level. Anticipated to be the next Chicago because of our connections to the water and all that, and all the western expansion. But ask 5 people why we didn't become Chicago, and you'll get at least 6 opinions. You know why? A lot of theories about the weather, the changing commerce. Our timing was just a little. Chicago had kind of the jump on things, or they're more central, all sorts of things. But we never get higher than the Allworth Building. We build a lot of nice other things and diversify, but it doesn't become that. We don't have a Sears Tower here. Right, yeah. And Ponce de Leon must have been the something of Leon.
Yeah.
Maybe the Prince of Leon.
Well, we certainly have mourning doves with the pigeons, don't we? One just flew up to the top.
They're doves.
Morning doves around our house. And
Pigeons are doves.
Presents all over.
Pigeons are doves. They're rock doves. That's the other name for them. So they're cousins.
I forgot one little story that last September I was giving the tour to just a couple. They were retirement age, and halfway through the tour, I find myself dangling above the canal by the ankle by the guy in the tour, by the guy I was giving the tour to. I don't have time to finish that story. It was right up by that second red light. Something you said made me think of it. It wasn't something I said. We were standing right telling my Boeing story and looking over his shoulder, and there's a pigeon flopping around in the water. It was probably a young one that had fallen out of his nest or something, taking his first flight he couldn't get off the water, and he runs into the wall, and we kind of stopped talking. We were looking at it and looking down. This is, his days are numbered here. He can't get out. So I run back to the hotel. I get a broom. I take a broom apart, tape a bucket to the bottom of the broomstick. Too dirty to show you here. Where it actually happened. And so I got a broomstick with a bucket on it. I'm going to scoop the pigeon out of the water. The broomstick isn't long enough. Pretty soon I can't get down there. I said, can you hang on to my ankle? So he's hanging on by ankle. If you imagine a broomstick, it's a little long ways down there, so he's got me by the ankle as I'm hanging.
Oh, save that poor bird's life.
It'd be better if I'd said something wrong.
Yeah.
I've heard of a shakedown, but
This is going bad.
Well, we appreciate all of the
Yeah.
good stories that you gave us.
Yeah.
Wilhelm Boeing. He's got a Wikipedia page. Yeah, thanks for taking the time and
thank you.
weathering
Getting some of the local stories.
Yeah, it's a constant. The canal is a concentration. There's a lot of conflict. Park Point, Duluth, Lake the Bay, weather and man. Anything. It's a bottleneck. So stuff is going to happen. There's going to be stories. 150 years of it. So.
When was this built?
1908.
Yeah.
2002.
Oh,
Yeah, this was rather about
Closing in in 19 years. May 24th is our anniversary, so that's coming up here very shortly.
Oh, wow.
We built it from scratch. It sits up nice and high. When we built it, it sat just as low as it is high now, and we brought in a lot of fill and a lot of bought it without not knowing what we were going to do with it. We just knew it was next to the Eiffel Tower here. It was zoned commercial. Got to be good for something. We'd never been in the hotel business before. We were kind of more on the contracting. I was a real estate appraiser, and my dad was a contractor, and my brother's a plumbing guy. And so we knew we had that going for us. Said he was a real good business person, a successful business in town. And so we bought it kind of without an idea. Figured we'd lease it to somebody. Get the property, lease it out. And then the little spark, my dad stayed at a B&B in Cornucopia over on the Wisconsin side. And we'd never thought of or even heard of a brand new B&B. We always thought B&Bs were Victorian charmers, old
somebody's
houses.
old house.
And this was a brand new one, and it was just one of those things you never thought of before. And we thought, and it happened to be an 8-room B&B, all brand new, and we thought we could put that here. We could manage an 8-unit deal, and then as the numbers and everything kind of flip-flopped around, we ended up at 29. Bigger was more viable, more likely to succeed. So it was as high as 35 in the planning, and as low as 24 or the 8. And so once we had that idea, we decided not to lease it out and to build it ourselves and run it ourselves. I was the first manager for a couple of years. And it at May 24th is a good time to open in Duluth in the tourist business. So we opened at the right time. And it went well. It's been a success. A lot of people have been having fun here ever since. So we're proud of it.
We're back again, so
wonderful.
Although first time doing the tour, so I don't know when you started doing that.
Yeah.
Just last September, it was kind of a COVID thing. There was less to do, nothing was open, museums were closed. You couldn't sit in the lobby, which I usually sit and kind of tell some of these stories or answer questions. You couldn't do that anymore. So kind of 2 and 2 put together. I'll stitch some things together. I came up with 9 stories and then tried to. It's not really that anymore, but that's what I started with. People who are interested seem to enjoy it, and I'll keep doing it. I like doing it. It gets me here sooner, and now I put my maintenance hat on and I start to pick up a paintbrush. Yep, exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for staying with us.
Job of
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
keeping